So I'm Greg Nelson. I am currently the Vice President of Analytics and Strategy for Vitan Health System in Greenville, North Carolina. After a 15-year stint, I'm into week 2. So after 15 years of running an analytics advisory firm called ThoughtWave, I decided that I had enough of consulting. No, that's not true. I love consulting. I love the diversity of the problem sets. Just seeing so many different environments and looking at maturity across analytics maturity across organizations. But one of the things that I really was passionate about was healthcare and trying to make a difference. And it's pretty hard to do if you're outside the healthcare system. So I decided to take the plunge and had an opportunity here to lead a very smart team. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Very cool. Congratulations, first of all. Your first 2 weeks, how's it going so far? Is it very different than the consulting world?
So one thing I did not fully expect, and it's so funny because on the consulting side, you don't get pulled into all these meetings. But if you're, it could be that I'm new, but if you look at everybody's calendar, it's like just packed with meetings. I guess that's the most surprising thing about this job.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've had meetings in consulting and outside of consulting. I feel like there are always meetings for anything. Yeah, that's right. Maybe you're just new. You're right. I'm sure there's a lot of meetings in the future.
Yeah.
So, okay, great. Well, I wanted to ask, you said you wanted to focus on healthcare and make an impact. Yeah. What kind of impact do you think you're trying to make, and what would define success for you?
Yeah, so I view healthcare as this absolutely fascinating experiment that's going on in our country, around the world, quite frankly. But in America, the incentives are so backwards. It's an environment where the people who need the services and consume the services don't actually pay for the services in the most part. We have this thing called a safety net, which I really appreciate. Being an individual in a democracy, it makes a lot of sense. The challenge is that incentives drive behavior, and because the incentives are challenging, healthcare as a whole, from reimbursements all the way to preventative care and wellness, and how do you actually create communities of health, is very challenging, and it's a very hard problem. How that translates into the data and analytics world is that people have very complicated understanding of how data is acquired, transformed, and used. And compared to most industries, healthcare is just crawling, right? So we've climbed out of the crib, and now we're crawling down the hallway, so to speak. And I think being in an organization where I could contribute to that acceleration, I think is a fun challenge.
Yeah, very interesting. So I do get several messages on LinkedIn about, how to get started in data science and data analytics. Do you have any advice for folks that want to focus specifically on the healthcare industry and data analytics? Where do you think they should start?
Yeah, so the first question I will ask you, because I teach at Duke and I've taught at NC State. At Duke, I teach at the business school in a program called the Masters of Quantitative Methods. Mm-hmm. Also teach nursing students, master's nursing students, as well as at the Institute for Advanced Analytics at NC State. I taught health and life sciences track for the analytics folks there.
Oh.
So I think the question I'll ask you in return before I answer the question is, how do you define analytics?
I think using data to make business decisions in the healthcare industry would be how I would define analytics.
Yeah. So, and then how do you define data science?
Data science is, I guess, using, programming and all these cool data analytics tools to get to the answer, and really, starting with a hypothesis, using the scientific method, but with data. That's how I view data science.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm sure as you talk to lots of people, you probably get varied definitions of both of those things.
Yes.
And in fact, in the book, I actually spend the first chapter really baselining expectations about what do we mean by these things. And so I think one of the things that's challenging by not having a common vocabulary, even within our industry, but
Mm-hmm.
across industries, people have sort of their own preconceived notions about what a data scientist is. If you talk to a statistician, they'll say, yeah, I'm a data scientist. If you talk to a data engineer, they will say, I'm a data scientist. If you talk to an informaticist or an analyst who is doing reporting for business need, they would also call themselves potentially a data scientist. And so, because we have so many varied definitions, I think my answer usually to people who ask this question, students and others in their careers, is, what are you passionate about? What do you absolutely love to do? And I'll give them examples like, do you like to make data sing on a screen? Do you like to beat data into submission? Or do you like the problem solving? How do I solve a complex business problem where I'm aided in that practice of data? Because all three of those, as you well know, really drive the direction that one should pursue in their academic or pursuit of learning. And I will tell you, I do have a bias in this, and I think we all sort of have our own biases that we bring to the table. And that is, I think technology is an enabler and should be used as a tool, and people should have fluency across various tool sets and not get enamored with the technology, but focus on, how can I help? How can I help solve a problem? How can I help tell a story? Or how can I help bring data assets together to help form a cohesive story that underlies a report, a graph, infographic, things like that. So ultimately, it's I was a consultant for 15 years, so I can say this. It depends, right? So that's a long answer to say it depends.
No, I think it's a good answer. So basically start with something you're passionate about and then try to solve problems, and don't focus so much on a specific tool. Just use whatever tool can help you solve the problem, right?
Yeah, and I would also add to that is, I think we do learning for purpose and learning for potential.
Mm-hmm.
In that context, people who get master's degree or long-term terminal degrees tend to be learning for potential. And then learning for purpose is, I go Google something, or I take a data camp course, or I do something quick so that I can bring up to speed. I think the MOOCs and other opportunities that help us do that sort of help bridge the gap between learning for purpose and potential. But I also caution people about overemphasizing classes and certifications and boot camps, and make it practical, learn on the job, get a mentor, find somebody who's willing to coach you, and self-study, of course, is a great way to do that.
Very nice. Well, thank you for that advice. And you alluded to this when you started talking about your first chapter of your book, and I did want to talk about your book. So it's the Analytics Lifecycle Toolkit.
Yeah.
Congratulations on getting that published. I think it came out like 2-3 months ago, right?
Yeah, just April 5th, I think, April 3rd, somewhere around there.
Okay, great. Well, let's hear more about the book, and I'd love to hear, why did you write it? What challenges did you have in writing it? How long did it take? And I'm asking all these questions because I love writing books, and so this is kind of my learning as well. But also, how do you think it stands out amongst the other books that are, about analytics that are?
Yeah. So the primary motivation for writing the book is that I saw lots of books and resources on the market that really fell into two categories. They were either overviews evangelizing the importance of analytics or data science, or they were very specific cookbook style references that people might use, to learn how to do something in a specific language using a specific method.
Yeah.
And of course, there are the methodological books like statistics and operations research that are found in the academic world. One of the things I saw missing was, for whether it's a nurse or a person who's been doing this 30 or 40 years, the question becomes, well, I know what I do, or maybe if you're a nurse and you're aspiring to understand how to use data, you don't really know all the processes. Where do I fit? What are the areas of opportunity? Just like we were talking about the various definitions of data science. you may not even know what you don't know when it comes to the analytics lifecycle, all the way from problem framing to data sense making to analytic model development, results activation, and then this thing that underlies it, which I call the analytic product management lifecycle. And what I wanted to do is give somebody like Ralph Kimball's early works in the data warehouse toolkit, provide something that gave somebody a roadmap for, if I've never done it before, can I follow it? And what are some best practices? And then for those that are in mature organizations that use analytics, look at what are some best practices that if we're struggling on either the effectiveness or the efficiency aspect of that side of analytics, how do I get better? What are benchmark companies doing that might help me provide for how to do that better?
Mm-hmm. And when did you start writing the book?
So I wrote the proposal last January, so I guess it was January of 2017. Wiley accepted the proposal a couple months later, and I really started writing in earnest in July of last year, and I finished it in the October timeframe. So it was a pretty short. I'd written a lot. I had a lot of things that I'd written for conferences and other things. So, a lot of the information. And we also spent a lot of time on things like data strategy. Well, I'd written a lot on that, data governance and the people and process. So the competency model that I published in that book was all based on work that we had done at ThoughtWave with clients over the last 15 years. So it was kind of a culmination of bringing a lot of assets together, but the 5 central chapters to it, which actually outline the actual analytic best practices, the lifecycle best practices. So it, about 5 months from beginning to end, and then there's lots of copy edits and wait, things like that.
Great. So where can people find the book? What's the best way?
I always send people to Amazon just because it's easy to find, and I've got a couple of reviews on there, which I'm happy about. So if you like the book, write a review. If you don't like the book, send me an email.
That's a good one. So I'll add a link when I share this video. I'll add a link and then the YouTube video description as well, so people can pick that up and write a great review.
That's great.
So the next question for you is just getting to know you better, Greg, and what do you like to do outside of work? So in your spare time, if you have.
Yes. So I have way too many hobbies, as my wife will tell you. So one of them is I have this big, beautiful wood shop, and so I do woodworking, everything from small turning pens to making large cabinets, and so I love that just because it's. I kind of view it as, you're familiar with Stephen Few and Edward Tufte and sort of the dichotomy that people have expressed. There was one article written about years ago, Moses versus Jesus or something like that. It was a fascinating article. But what I use that to describe is that I like woodworking because it sort of plays on this engineering precision sort of aspect. Because if 2 joints come together and they fit really well, that's really elegant, aesthetically nice. And then there's the aesthetic side, the creativity, the sort of the innovative part of woodworking. And so I think bringing those 2 things together is a really nice release outside of the work environment. I also ride a Harley, and I have lots of hobbies. But
of course you do. That's awesome. You're actually, I think, the 3rd or 4th person who rides a motorcycle from my Humans of Data Science. There
is that right?
Must be some correlation there.
Yeah, I think so.
You guys should all meet and go ride together.
That's right. We'll have a meetup.
Yes. Great. So the last question I have for you today is about your future goal. It could be personal or professional. About what would you like to accomplish over the next year or 2?
Yeah, so my big challenge, obviously stepping into this role, I have some pretty clear goals. And for me, it's about helping to improve the overall analytics maturity of an enterprise. That's a pretty big challenge. And for me, that what I'd like to see is that we begin to use analytics in everyday conversation with patients, with nurses, with doctors, with frontline clinical workers, with people in operations and finance and population health. And so it becomes part of the common vocabulary where people say, I have an idea, And the next thing is, and I know that we can test this using data and experiments. And so building that mindset of analytics literacy and fluency into an organization is my long-term challenge. And I know it won't be a year, just because I think I'm going to be in meetings for the next year.
Well, great. Well, Greg, thank you so much for making time to be on Humans of Data Science. It was really great getting to know you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.